Excellent. Thank you, Sauce Labs, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar and giving us this opportunity. My name is Rick Rampton. I'm QASource's Head of Client Success, and we're thrilled today to present this topic to you. You're all probably here because you believe the same thing that we do, which is that better automation equals a higher quality product and faster releases. And our goal today is to tell you how to make better test automation. And we will be covering a lot of information in 40 minutes, and we'll be making a lot of recommendations. And we expect that each slide is beneficial to anyone doing automation, wherever you're at in your automation. And it is great to see a huge turnout today. It seems like it's higher than normal turnout, which tells us that this topic is very important to all of you. So before we get into it, let me introduce Rajeev and QASource, and then we'll also do a quick poll for everyone that's listening as well. We're lucky to have Rajeev Rai, who's the CEO of QASource, here with us today. Rajeev has over 20 years of experience in QA and is widely recognized as an expert in building, managing, and retaining high-performing engineering teams. Prior to founding QASource, Rajeev led QA initiatives at Apple, Informix, and Macromedia, which was subsequently acquired by Adobe. Rajeev built and sold Quality Test as an early pioneer in QA technology and processes before founding QASource in 2003. Rajeev's grown QASource from a small team of 3 engineers to an international organization of over 600 professionals servicing clients ranging from VCs, funded startups, to Fortune 500 companies. And QASource has grown 20 to 50% annually and is a market leader in test automation services. And we have customers that have had successful exits exceeding $11 billion in mergers and acquisition transactions, which has led to our QASource slogan, quality that creates value. And as it relates to automation, QASource is a comprehensive QA services provider that focuses on automation. And we've been doing that for over a decade. Over the last 12 years of doing automation, we've worked with many different clients and built out many different automation frameworks using framework types such as data-driven, hybrid, object-oriented. We've used different tools, Selenium being a popular one, QTP, Telerik, and many others that are maybe some people have not heard of, like Squish, and many mobile tools as well. And of course, we've done this across a variety of different languages, Java, PHP, Python, Perl, Ruby, and so on. And then, of course, using many different technologies to make sure that the automation gets used, it's integrated into your systems, into your CI, and continuous integration. So before we go ahead and get started here, let's do a quick poll. And this will help us get to know you better as an audience as well, so that we can understand where you're coming from. And so the first question, or the question that we're going to ask today, is what is the single biggest reason behind maximum failures in your automation? And the screen's popped up, and you'll be able to answer this question on the screen. And basically what we're after here is, after you run your automation, what is mostly causing your failures? Are your failures a result of flaky tests, which they sometimes pass, sometimes fail, you're not sure what's going on? Or are the failures because of false positives, which are tests that fail that shouldn't have failed? Or is the reason due to poor code? So those are typically the main ones, and so we'd really love to see what your answers are and what your hangups are as it relates to the automation that you're building. And hopefully many of you have been measuring this and know exactly what the answer, but I imagine there's lots of us that also may not be measuring, but have an intuition on what the right answer is here, and from our own experience. So either way, please just answer the best you can. And we'll keep it up for just a few more seconds here while we get into the results. Great. And looks like we're getting some good answers. And we'll go ahead and share the results now with everyone here. And this is to be as expected. We're all in the same boat here. We have a high percentage of flaky tests, which is very common. And then we have a high percentage of all of the above. And so that's as expected. And today we're going to identify areas to help improve that. And we'll address some of those things throughout the presentation. Okay, great. I think we're ready to get to the meat of the presentation. So with great pleasure, I will be handing it off to Rajeev. And please note at the end of the webinar, we will have time for a Q&A. So please answer those questions in the Q&A box, and as well as we'll also be providing a link to additional resources, including a free checklist, which will summarize the presentation today for you. All right, Rajeev.
All right, thank you, Rick. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me, giving me the opportunity to share our learnings with you. I'm very, very excited to be here. Future automation. Automation is very near and dear to my heart. We are going to talk about future of our automation. What does it mean? How do we future-proof? In simple terms, future-proofing your automation means to build your automation so it is able to adapt and does not become obsolete as product and test evolve. Your automation continues to deliver long-lasting value to the product. Okay? This is an information-packed session that would probably require multiple webinars. However, Rick has asked me to deliver this in 40 minutes. We'll be zipping through this quickly. Please feel free to send us questions after the webinar, and we'll be happy to answer them. If you don't invest in future-proofing your automation, chances are that over time, a majority of failures found by your automation will be false positives, as opposed to suggesting, it's flaky tests, and that is going to result in your team spending a majority of the time fixing their scripts rather than automating new features. In this webinar, I'll share the 7 strategies that we follow in scoping, developing, executing, analyzing, and reporting of automation. And we have developed these strategies based on our learnings after automating over 1 million tests for hundreds of times. We're going to talk about each of these strategies in a little more detail in the following slides. I'm going to try to do justice to these slides as much as I can in the little time that we have, but let's do it. These strategies will help you build automation that delivers quantifiable, reliable, and predictable results that will aid in faster release of the product. This webinar, when I was putting this together with a team, is geared towards individuals who are leading their automation effort. However, all who are involved in automation will learn something from this. Whether you're starting your automation effort or you have been doing it for years, this will be a good way to strategize the start or audit of your existing automation. So I'm very, very excited to deliver this. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do in automation really is, how do we do really automation scope? Just the next slide, please. Automation scope review. This is the first of our 7 strategies we talk about in automation scope. And I know scoping seems like a rudimentary concept, but so many organizations we've walked into don't do this before they embark on their automation journey. Okay? Scoping needs to be done because you want to align your ROI with what you're going to automate. Okay? Future-proofing begins before you start automating. We want the automation to be used over and over throughout the product lifecycle and not be put on the shelf. You want to build automation that gets utilized and brings a higher ROI. So whenever you start an automation project, the first thing you should do is to decide the scope where you're going to identify what can and cannot be automated. Okay? Very important, what can and cannot be automated, what should or should not be automated. Okay? This way, you won't be wasting time and effort automating something you know is unstable, unreliable, not fully developed, or automation effort is greater than the effort to test manually. It is very important to analyze the application test cases before you begin automation, instead of automating it immediately and discovering that certain features cannot be automated. And I know it's hard. I mean, you need to learn how to say, no, hey, I can't automate this, or I won't automate this, or it cannot be automated. And then do automate as much as you can. And this is a concentrated effort to identify which of the test cases and features will yield the maximum return on investment. A test case that we perform once every 3 months is probably not a good candidate for automation. It doesn't make sense to spend the time automating a test case that we run only 4 times a year. However, a test case that runs daily or even once a week is probably a better candidate for automation. And again, once again, I know it's a elementary. We're going to get into more deeper stuff, but this is, I want to make sure we start off by defining the scope. What can and cannot be, what should and should not be automated. What can and cannot be automated. Okay. So once you've defined the scope, the next simple concept we're going to talk about is what tools and technologies that we're going to use to build the automation. There's a plethora of choices. You can use Java, JSON, Python. Your Ruby frameworks are there. There's a hybrid-based framework. There's a page object model. There's testability. You've heard all the buzzwords. I'm not going to go into that. But to make your automation future-proof, define the right tool, define the right programming language, define the right framework type, and the automation model that is best suited for your product. At QASource, we are a tool-agnostic company. We take great pride in selecting the right tool for the right time, right job. Many times we walk into an organization where they're a .NET shop and their automation is Selenium and Java. But this works. But is it optimal? Is it future-proof? Absolutely not. When we asked why they selected Selenium and Java, the typical answer was because the lead engineer had previous experience with the Java framework or Selenium and Java. Well, it works, but in .NET shop, Selenium and Java are not going to integrate well with the development environment. The .NET developers are not going to be very inclined to use the test written in Java. Now, why developers? That's a novel concept. Why do developers need to worry about automation? Well, the ultimate goal is to build automation that not only gets used by your QA team, but also by your development team. Therefore, it's extremely important to collaborate with your development team while evaluating tools and technology. During evaluation, you may also learn that there are features which do not have the right locators or the hooks to automate these features. Well, you'll need to work closely with developers to get these hooks built into the code. So when you're selecting an automation tool, you want to keep your requirements and future implementations of the product in mind. Okay? During collaboration with development teams, you would be privy to the future roadmap, development features, deployment environment, development environment. It's going to be on-prem or both or in the cloud. And how are you going to do continuous integration? How is the product build or release process is going to work? So your automation really is going to be utilized by a development team as well as the QA team. So you need to collaborate with them. They are the ones who are going to provide you a lot of the hooks and all that you need to be really building an effective automation suite. Okay? These are some of the key ingredients you want to evaluate while conducting the feasibility analysis when you're evaluating tools and technology. Okay? All this information is going to help you immensely. What kind of a framework, what priority of automation of features, and what is going to be your automation coursework. So let's say, for example, you're automating a web-based application. After looking at the application and features, you decide to use Selenium. Well, during collaboration with development, you may learn that there is a product roadmap where there might be a mobile version might be coming. But unfortunately, Selenium does not support mobile applications. It can work if you use a separate framework for mobile. But most of our clients that we have learned is want to use a single tool for both mobile and web applications. Now, if you know the future roadmap, you probably won't choose Selenium. You may want to make you will make an educated decision, and you may decide to use Test Complete, Ranorak, or UFT, or one of those. Once again, we're not suggesting that one tool is better over the other. We just need to choose a tool that works best in your environment and really understand the scope of your product. Really understand the scope, not only today, but really get involved. QA teams need to get involved in the future roadmap of the product. It's very, very important so that you pick the best tool. Okay. So I'm going to zip through this stuff here. We completed a scope review. We have done we have picked the tools. Now let's go ahead and figure out our automation design. Okay, what are automation design strategy going to look like? Okay, this is really where we get into the meat of the webinar to build a maintainable, robust, portable automation that we're talking about as a future-proof. Okay, and this is still the planning stage, by the way. We still have not written a line of code yet. And when you're doing your automation strategy, there are things that you want to keep in mind. What is going to be your framework development process? How are you going to build your framework? What is your framework architecture going to look like? How are you going to build a framework that's modular? And how are you going to identify objects? What is going to be your object for strategy for object identification? Okay. Your framework is the foundation to feasibility automation. No matter how well the code for your test is written, if you don't have the right framework, your tests will be brittle and they will break and they won't work in future. It is critical to take the utmost care when you're building the framework. In the next few slides, we are going to break down what each of these areas are going to look like. What is the framework development process going to look like? Yes, next slide, please. So let's first look into the framework development process. What is the framework development process? You really need to document what conventions, standards, guidelines you will follow and ensure that your engineers are following this process. I understand this sounds like basic stuff, but we work in a lot of organizations and they don't have this in place. You need these processes. You'll need to create a set of guidelines that will help you maintain standards and train your engineers. In every automation project that I've led, it is crucial. If you don't have these processes documented, then what happens when you add a new engineer to do automation? Or somebody leaves and somebody new comes in. Well, the new person that comes in, if they don't follow these guidelines and that you've been building over the years, most likely the code they're going to write, for lack of a better word, that code they're going to write is kind of stuck. They either are going to write code that's already been written, or they're not going to use some of the reusable libraries that you built because they're not aware, or they're not commenting properly, even the basic stuff about writing code, they're not following, or that per your requirements, or they're duplicating coverage, or all of these are going to result in a bad code, unstable, unreliable, and you're going to get inconsistent failures, further leading to an increased maintenance effort. Okay? So therefore, we highly recommend creating a written, living document outlining your framework development process. In addition to convention, standard, guidelines, this document shall also include what's your code review process, what is your code commit process, and of course, what your framework architecture is going to look like. Okay, and this is something you'll continue to refine and update as you're building your automation. Framework architecture, good segue. In the next slide, we'll talk about framework architecture. Okay. Let's dive into this important aspect. You want to design the framework architecture based on the type of the application, your development environment, and keeping the skills out of the members who are going to write and use these tests. Okay. All of these variables are going to help you decide what kind of framework are you going to use. Are you going to use a page object model? Are you going to use hybrid model? Or are your engineers well versed in behavior-driven development? Or does keyboard-driven work best for you? We don't know. You'll have to really spend the time to figure out what works best for your application and task. Okay. Here we're sharing a basic diagram for you, which is based on a page object model that we built. Where you can see where we're defining here our global configs are there. We have a test data, and the test driver is there. There's page object, and we're scheduling all of our tests, and all the tests are running, and then they're going. We're reporting that. Okay. So that's like a very basic framework architecture looks like. So you will need to define what your framework architecture is going to look for your environment. So we have the development process, we have the architecture, and the next slide we're going to talk about is the modularity of your framework. Okay? When you are designing your automation strategy, please make sure your framework design is modular, irrespective of the type of framework you use. The modular framework must be loosely coupled. Framework that includes, customized actions, global configurations, application-independent utilities, and test data parameterization. I'll get into each one of those. It is very important that we sort of talk about this and what is loosely coupled framework. You're building a framework where all the components are independent of each other. This way, we can change one component without affecting other components. It reduces your maintenance and essentially lets you do more automation. And customized actions. These are the actions that are going to help you add additional control or verification points to your standard out-of-the-box framework, whether it's Selenium, Q, UFT, whichever framework you might use. But your customized actions are going to help you enhance it by adding your own code. Okay? Next is your global configurations. What do they do? These are going to help you set your different capabilities to your framework globally at one place. If you want to do a parallel execution, you need to define somewhere. You want to run on different platforms. You want to run on different operating systems. You want to run on different environments. You want to run on different clouds. Whatever, these all needs to be part of your global configuration file where you make it change one place and it affects everything. Now, then you want to have application-independent utility. Okay, and this is, by the way, we're sharing this with you. This may or may not apply to you because we work with a lot of our clients, and we try to optimize it for as much as for them, so we don't have to rewrite this stuff. Where we have written a lot of utilities. There are a lot of the generic common libraries we've developed. For example, if we need to read in a file, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already have a library that helps us to read in a file. We want to be able to connect and query a databases. We already have those built. It's something that you may want to think about doing that as you're building your framework. How do you integrate with third-party tools, etc.? So these are applications, regardless of what application and test is, but these utilities will help you. Okay. And next thing we want to talk about is test data parameterization. Okay. You want to make sure that your automation is data independent. This enables a test suite to be iterated through multiple sets of test data. You can feed as much test data you want, and this is going to help you enhance usability of your automation. Okay. So, in automation design strategy, we've talked about, we've created a framework development process. We have built our framework architecture. Now, framework is modular, and now we'll talk about our object identification. Okay. Now, object identification strategy. This is how we are going to identify the target elements that are needed to perform an action. Okay. Majority of the tests fail because of changes in the locators of UI elements. The majority of tests fail because of the changes in locators of UI elements. You need to decide what is going to work best in your environment. Which locator is going to help you uniquely identify objects in your environment? Is it going to be ID, class, name, link, etc.? Or are you going to use XStar, which is our least favorite way to do? Okay. This is the single most important ingredient in future-proofing your automation. This requires close collaboration with developers to get various hooks, unique object properties, developer IDs to identify objects in an application. Okay. However, still application is developing, changing, and you need to keep up with this change. Okay. And we know that. And at QASource, to overcome this challenge of failures happening due to frequent changes to object properties, we have built our own AI engine that helps the script adapt and identify elements with a new property. If the original property was changed during development, our AI engine will aid in finding the object, complete the test, log the pending object for future analysis, and really this engine has helped us in reducing our automation regression time analysis by 60% in some cases. Okay. This is really, this is something you guys may want to think about. Okay.
Yeah, Rajeev, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that's something that QASource is doing and developing that is kind of the future of automation. So the AI engine is something that we're developing to really future-proof your automation. And this, again, if anyone has questions on that, we'd be happy to answer those offline. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. And then we in a previous webinar on reducing false positives, which extensively talks about our object identification strategies with code examples. And Rick can probably got our scoping, we validated our tool, we've done our design strategy. Now let's talk about our test script creation strategy. And so while getting ready for this webinar, I was reviewing the submitted questions, and one of the questions asked was about record and playback. Okay? As you can see, that we have spent a significant amount of time prepping before creating any test scripts. This preparation runs counter to record and playback, where you're told to just point, click, record, and run, and that is automation. Well, it does not work. Please, please, please do not use it. Do not get fooled by a marketing machine or some of our favorite tools. It does not work. I mean, you really have to put in the time when you're doing automations. You got to put in the time upfront, and that's just, it's a requirement. So now let's look at the test script creation strategy. There is a huge list of activities that need to be kept in mind during test script creation. Some of this has to be repeated from framework development strategy because, in our experience, in some of the projects where framework developers are different than the script creators, in your environment it may be the same, so you can choose which way you want to go. But, we could easily deliver a whole webinar or two on this, but we'll just briefly talk about some of the above points. Oh, look at this, all this stuff. Well, some of the above points in the slide here. Script mapping, script commenting, and script patterns are self-explanatory. To elaborate on a few, to minimize false positives, it's really very important to maintain control state of your test. The test script should always start and end in known state to deliver successful results. And also you need to make sure your tests are independent tests. Independent tests, why do we need them? Because dependent tests are brittle, and the results would impact the other scripts. Other points you want to consider are your soft and hard insertions, exception handling, unique test data, and teardown. And teardown is very, very important. What does teardown mean? This means at the end of each script, we dispose of all active objects and remove the test data. This is very important. Teardown ensures that each and every script starts from a controlled state of the application. If we do not perform teardown, then we may end up facing memory leaks or issues with the residual objects, and really resulting in false positives. Okay? So now that you've created your future-proof test scripts, now you need to be starting execution on those scripts. We've done the design strategies, we've done written the scripts. Now let's go ahead and execute them. Once again, we have a lot of recommendations in this presentation. Not all of them apply to you. Please use what works for you. It is very important for people to know how to execute their scripts. Usually people run all of their tests on one platform, or they would run their tests in a sequential fashion. In order to have a future-proof automation suite, you need to take a test suite, break it up into groups, and do parallel execution if needed in different environments or the same environments, but definitely do parallel execution. Okay? In our case, majority of the time we're having to run tests and various different OSs, various different browsers, various different platforms. As you can see on the slide, we have divided the automation into various logical groups, and we're parallelly executing these groups in various environments. Now, could these groups be run in one environment? Absolutely. I mean, if this is what you need to do, you can decide. But for us, majority of the time, we are taking the test cases, dividing them into logical groups, and running them into various different environments. Okay? This allows us to have any number of combinations of different environment operating system configurations. In the parallel execution, we can run it locally on our hosted VMs, or we can run with a provider such as SoftLab to quickly scale up number of environments required for faster execution. To put things in perspective, I mean, we've been able to, with parallel execution, we've been able to reduce our test execution time, automation test execution time, from weeks to minutes, from days to minutes, where some of the things that used to take us on various different combinations of operating system browsers, back and front end, over a week to do, now we can do it in a few minutes. So this is something you definitely want to keep in mind when you're executing your script. Okay? Now, once you have completed your execution, now you need to generate those reports. Okay? And these reports can give you a lot of information. Let's get into reports. Next slide, please. Reporting is important for visibility among many other reasons. You need to decide based on your company's culture what type of reporting works in your organization and who needs to be informed. You could implement it in many different ways. The report could go out after every test run, or it could be emailed at a scheduled test, or you could be posting these reports to a drill-down enabled dashboard. Your report could include just a summary, or it could include screenshots of failures. There are host ways of putting together these reports. At QASource, first thing we do is we sit down with the client to understand what are their needs and build a reporting strategy based on their requirements and the culture of the organization. We'll either email those reports or post it at a central location. We'll just summarize the reports, or we'll provide detailed reports, or we'll provide a drill-down version of reports for analysis, screenshots, video recording, or a basic test run report. It's really, one of the things we're suggesting is you need to meet with your stakeholders and really figure out what kind of reporting requirements are there. As QA team, it is your job to make sure that the work that you're producing is being recognized, and also you are highlighting, as leaders, you're highlighting the ROI that your team is building. Okay? So reporting is going to help you do that. Okay? In addition to reporting results, we also measure the effectiveness of your automation. These reports can also help you measure the effectiveness of your engineers, the velocity of test case automation, and we'll talk about this. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about is we'll give you a simple report execution example, and also we can show you how to measure results. Actually, we did a whole webinar around this, measure way to successful automation. I think Rick will give you a link to that as well. So let me get into this. I'm being told I'm running out of time here. So this is a basic example of what a basic automation report could look like. Okay, the report will change depending on the type and number of operating systems and/or browsers your team may use. As you can see, this report has a brief summary. It includes the results of that execution, name the test suite, how long the execution took. We can further drill this down to see a detailed execution report for test case. Each failure is mapped to a line number of the code where the test is failing. And this analysis really can help you identify problems right away. And you can make reports, again, what works in your environment. We highly recommend that. And at QASource, we customize these reports based on the client, the company's need, and the culture, what's required. Okay. So this is a basic example report. And the next one is, now this slide seems very complicated, but it's not. Why it is important to future-proof your automation, it is to ensure your company is continuing to get ROI from automation. Okay? Reporting is very important because we firmly believe that you cannot improve what you cannot measure. Okay? And we did a webinar for this, measure way to successful automation, where we talked about with proper planning and measuring, you can spend most of your team's time creating scripts rather than maintaining failed scripts. And that is part of future-proofing automation, where your team is cranking out scripts that are reliable, that everybody can depend on. So you'll need to implement various metrics in order to track your team's progress. Okay? Make sure your team is going in the right direction. There are so many areas you can measure. I encourage you to look at this webinar that we have up there, that will help you optimize your effort, to help you learn where your team's efforts are. The goal is that your team is creating, writing, they're spending the most amount of time creating scripts, they're not spending the time maintaining those scripts, okay? So we've talked about scoping, selecting a tool, doing our design strategy, doing our test script creation design and execution, and now reporting. And then the last part I do have to talk about, nobody wants to talk about this, is our maintenance. Maintenance strategy, this is a big topic. And last but not least is, how do we maintain our script? You'll still need to maintain your automation. I mean, that's given. But implementing a maintenance strategy similar to the one we're going to present to you will make your maintenance effort more efficient. Okay. To do maintenance, you need to make sure that you do have a failover strategy. You do have a refactorization process in place. When the scripts are failing, you are spending time triaging those scripts. Okay. And you are going to need to deal with flaky tests. You got to figure out how to deal with flaky test management. Okay. And obviously, we also recommend that you do a retrospection at a prescribed time. It could be quarterly, 6 months, whatever works in your organization. Those are the 5 things you need to keep in mind: your failover, your refactorization, script retriage, and flaky test management and retrospection. Okay. And in future, we'll do a webinar to go over a lot of these topics. But for now, as we saw from our polls also, the flaky test was a hot button. So, we need to make sure that, I will talk about this. I'll briefly talk about flaky test management because this was one of the questions submitted in our pre-webinar questions as well. So, what are flaky tests? Flaky tests are, in our view, are tests that fail inconsistently. They reduce trust in the results of your automation application. Flaky tests result in wasting both developers and QA engineers' time in performing analysis of these hypotheses. Okay. In order to make your automation future-proof, you have to decide how your team will manage these flaky tests. Okay. One of the ways we manage is that we manage where we create a separate suite of these unusable test cases, or not unusable, unstable test cases, or test cases of unstable features in an application. Okay. And so we keep performing maintenance in order to fix these unstable test cases in suites. Okay. This way, what it does is that these are sort of an isolated where your other automation runs. That automation is reliable. Everybody can trust it, and your team can continue to fix these unstable tests. Okay. Now you could have some fun and implement something like Flaky Friday on this day once a week. Team's sole focus would be on fixing the failed scripts and moving them to a stable suite. Okay. So before I bring this information pack session to a close, let me recap on the steps that we can make to future-proof your automation. Okay. So we've given you 7 strategies with multiple steps that will help you make your automation future-proof. Okay. First one we talked about is automation scope review. What should be automated and what should not be automated? What can and cannot be automated? I mean, this is where you make or break the game in automation. You got to figure out your scope. Next thing is that you got to evaluate your tool. Use a tool that is best suited for your application environment. And you got, framework. You got to build a framework that will be happily used by both dev and QA teams. And you're going to need to collaborate with development teams. Okay. Next one we talk about is your automation design strategy. What will be your framework development process? How will your framework architecture look like? How you're going to make your framework modular? and how you're going to identify objects. Your object identification strategy is your single most important thing in your automation strategy. You got to figure out how you're going to identify your objects. Okay. Next we talk about is your test script creation. Here we talk about a number of things you need to keep in mind. And if I was to emphasize the most important, it will be starting from known state. Make sure that you are starting your test from a known state, controlled state. And make sure your tests are independent, and ensure cleaning up after running a test to complete the teardown. You know, if you focus on these three things, you will really reduce a lot of false positives. Very, very important. And next thing we talked about was script execution strategy. We talked about parallel execution to speed up your time it takes to run our tests and help in analyzing issues with tests. You know, of course, the one thing I didn't talk about is re-execution logic. That's something we definitely recommend that you implement a re-execution logic. So during your script execution, if something is failing, we actually did a webinar on that as well, where if something fails, you don't want to just mark it as a failure. You may want to go back and re-execute those failed tests before you mark it as a failure. Depending on your environment, depending on your product, you may need to do this a couple of times. And we have a webinar on that as well that you guys may want to look at. So definitely implement a re-execution logic as well. Okay. And the next thing we talked about was reporting strategy. And reporting is very, very important. It is to provide visibility in your automation. Not only what passed and what failed, but also as leaders, you want to be thinking about how can I highlight ROI for my team? How can I showcase my team's achievement? Okay, this is to measure the performance of your team, and most importantly, provide confidence in your automation results, and equally important to the organization for ROI of the automation. Okay, and the last but not least, we talked about was your maintenance strategy. You'll still need to maintain your automation and have a solid plan for script triaging and flaky test management, among others. Okay. In our experience, if you implement what you've learned here today, you will have high-quality frameworks that's used by developers, that's used by QA teams. It's easy to maintain. It eliminates as many false positives as possible, and will last you many years in the future. Your organization can rely and trust your automation. So once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. Hope this will be beneficial to you, and I appreciate it. And over to you, Rick.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you, Rajeev. I think I'll just add this is a lot of information.
Yeah.
And as you kind of outlined here on the slide, you know, as there's 7 different main categories, but each category can be broken down into sub areas that we look at and other strategies that we consider. So thank you for that. And we do understand that this is packed with information, so we do want to provide a checklist to everybody, free checklist that you can download that does summarize the main points that we talked about today. And you can get that checklist by going to info.qasource.com/checklist. And it's a 22-point checklist that essentially helps you identify strategies that you can use to future-proof your automation. And even if you're just getting started in automation, you can also use this checklist to make sure you cover all the right areas when you're planning and building your automation out. And also, Rajeev mentioned a few webinars throughout the presentation, so you can also get those. One of them is reducing false positives and how to reduce false positives, and another one was measuring your way to successful automation, and there's a few other ones. You can go to QASource.com/webinars for that. Okay, great. We are ready for Q&A, Rajeev. We have about 10 minutes left, and for the remaining time, we would like to answer any questions that everyone has in the audience. We do have some pre-submitted questions that we've answered throughout the slides, and then there's also some other additional questions here that people have asked along the way. And so we'll go through those now and try to get through as many as possible in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so I'll go ahead and go through those. We've answered many of them I think throughout the presentation, for example, handling flaky tests. Thank you for doing that. And we did have a few questions about Selenium IDE and the record and playback. I know you addressed that a little bit. And there's some other questions about skill sets and what's required here. So let me ask this question here to kind of summarize these questions in one. We've just, this is a situational question that someone's asked. We just started with our automation, and my engineers have basic skills in automation, and we are at the record and play level for script creation. What type of skill sets and trainings are required to make automation future-proof?
Okay. You know how I feel about that. First of all, we don't recommend record and playback of scripts in automation. It just doesn't work. It's brittle. It's bound to fail. Tests are unreliable, and nowhere it's going to support you in the long run. For future-proofing automation, the skills that your team is going to require, they got to have a strong product knowledge. They got to know the language on which your framework is being developed. It's a policy. I don't know why people believe that automation engineers are even, not stronger developers. They got to have the fundamentals of how to write code, how to develop products, how to, it's very important. You got to know the object-oriented methodology. You got to have the framework design capability. It's required. You got to have a complete understanding of framework libraries and their integration with third-party tools. And your automation engineers will need to know any third-party controls, like how CI, allowed execution, how are you going to hook into that, how are you going to hook into your test case management system. And obviously, the skills are they able to follow your framework processes and framework standards that we've outlined. I think those are the things that need to require. Right?
Yeah.
So that's how I answer that.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And
if your team doesn't have those, you either need to reskill them or find the right people or provide them proper training.
Right. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay. Another question here, and I think this is a good one. We're a technology company. We are doing automation for the last 5 years. And do you have a toolkit, or how can we tell the maturity level of our automation? And I think by maturity level, I mention it's about how future-proof or.
I think we just give you a toolkit.
Okay. Well, we'll write the checklist as well.
We do have a toolkit available. That can tell you the maturity. The tool that we're going to provide is, it consists of, parameters which indicate if the automation is future-proof. I think we just give it to you.
Yeah, we'll provide that checklist as well. I think that would be beneficial for that as well, to see what you need, what you don't need, and then obviously reviewing the webinar that we've gone through and seeing what areas you can change or update or improve on.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Great. This is a good one, I think, about maintenance. Okay, so we have, this person thinks that they spend about 40% of our effort goes into maintenance of existing tests. How can we minimize the maintenance time for automation?
Oh, wow. This is the most frequently asked question. This is the most frequently asked question in automation webinars. Or at anywhere really. How can we reduce our maintenance efforts? Looking at the challenge of 40% being spent on maintenance, I guess you got to really look at it. Where the challenges are. Is your framework up to snuff? Your engineers writing, is there any duplicate code issues? Are they writing proper code? Are they really choosing the proper components? Are they choosing components that are ready for automation? Is there any hardware test data? Are there what kind of object identification they're talking about. And I think there's a lot of stuff they need to be really looking at. What is causing them to spend a lot of their time? I mean, do they have the proper engineers? Many times we have, what a lot of the people would do is, hey, we need to do automation. We have these, manual testers. Always send them to this, automation course. Spend 2 weeks. Now all of a sudden these guys become automation experts. Well, unfortunately, that's not quite how that works. So, and the kind of code that you're going to get from those guys is not is not going to be future-proof. You will be spending time doing maintenance. So, I mean, it's a loaded question. There's a lot of variables. I mean, you got to be looking at it. Are your engineers properly skilled? Is your framework proper? A lot of the things that we talk about in this webinar, right? We're going to look at all of them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think, like you said, and you spend time. Where are you spending that time? That 40% is on maintenance. Well, what are you maintaining? What part of it are you maintaining? Why are you maintaining it?
Right.
You ask that a few other times doing that, you're going to get to the bottom of it and figure out how to fix it.
Right. I mean, is it your framework? Is it your test script? Is it the code? Is the code that you're testing not proper? I mean, there's a lot of it.
Yeah. And Rajeev did a webinar with Sauce Labs, partnered with Sauce Labs a while back as well, on measuring your way to successful automation. Part of that was included in there as far as how to measure that maintenance work, what you're doing.
Absolutely. We go into a lot of detail.
Okay. Cool. Okay. All right. There's quite a few questions here specific to tools or other things, which I think I'll probably take offline. And I'll be happy to answer everyone's questions or have our team answer those questions offline on some of them. Another general question that I'm seeing here is about automation tools. So we're facing a lot of issues with our automation. We have a specific tool. We think it might be tool related. Will it help our automation to be future-proof if we change our tool?
Probably not. I don't know. Would it help you change the tool? I don't know. I mean, I think we really got to understand what the problem is. Has your team really done proper analysis when they selected the automation tool? This is what we said. The second strategy is to evaluate for tools and technologies. Even if you try the new automation tool, it's possible the tool is wrong, but first and foremost, you got to identify what the challenging areas are, what problem you want to solve, and then go ahead with your feasibility analysis. Keep one thing in mind: the switching tool is probably not going to help unless you know what the problem is. I would recommend, giving some of the things that we talked about in this webinar. Go through this methodically one by one, and then figure out maybe a tool. We don't know, but there is no panacea. There is no one tool that is going to solve all your problems. I would recommend you go through this methodically, one by one. You can follow our checklist that we provided, and that will help you figure out if it's the tool, if it's the people, if it's the code, if it's the product, if it's the framework, one of those variables is causing you to. So please don't just switch a horse.
Right.
That's probably not enough.
I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm also seeing a lot of questions. Things like people are maybe not new to automation, but new to building out their automation or starting on their automation. And there's one question here I think that encapsulates many questions, which is, I do have a small automation team of 2 people. Do I need to put that much effort to make my automation future-proof if it's a small team?
Oh, wow. I would say yes. I mean, excuse me. The ultimate aim for any automation really is to speed up the release cycle, deliver high-quality release, and taking your team off the mundane work of doing, same tests over and over again. And you want to take all that away and give it to your automation team. Yeah, you need to put that automation effort. Your team will be growing. I mean, I know one of the questions there was asked was, is my job at risk? Is manual testing going away? And well, from what we're seeing, yeah, if you have a 2-member automation team, your team will be growing, and you need to make sure you have these strategies in place, and because regardless of the team size, once you invest into this strategy, your ROI is going to shoot up, and you will be able to, spend majority of your time writing tests instead of maintaining those tests, and your automation will be stable. Yes, initial investment, initial investment in future-proofing is not really dependent on team size. This is something that needs to be done. It is, regardless of the size of the house, whatever, you got to have the blueprint. This is something a blueprint can do your automation. Absolutely, it's required. Yeah.
Right. And to keep your team size small. If you start spending more and more time on maintenance, it might be important to do that.
Yeah, then your team may not be doing writing any automation. They'll be just spending time on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rajeev. That's probably all the time we have for questions. Again, I do want to address questions that people asked, and so I'll work with Sauce Labs and see how we can best answer questions offline. You can also contact us on our website or knowledge center at QASource.com, and we'd be happy to continue the conversation. And again, please feel free to download our checklist on future-proofing your automation at info.qasource.com/checklist. And again, I just want to give a special thanks to Rajeev, thank you, and a special thanks to Sauce Labs and the team at Sauce Labs for having us present today. We've done multiple webinars with Sauce Labs, and they have been an excellent partner with us, so thank you.
And I want to thank the audience for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge with you. I appreciate it. Some of it may come across as opinionated, but it is. But I truly appreciate you giving me the opportunity, and I hope this will be beneficial to you, and you will be able to get a return on your investment. So thank you so much, and good luck to all of you.
And thank you, Rick and Rajeev. That was a terrific presentation. This is Bill from Sauce Labs. As you can see with the questions we have, it's a very hot topic, and so we'll be following up possibly with some blog posts, and then, as Rick mentioned, some direct contact. We are going to send out an email with a recording to a link to the recording and to the slides, and that should be out to you in the next day or so. So from Sauce Labs and QASource, thank you for participating, and we'll see you on the internet. Take care.